Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about sport participation for people who have a physical disability. The objective of this video is for you to learn about the various challenges that people with physical disabilities face, how the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, has affected these populations and their access to sport, and about the various social issues revolving around disability and sport here in the United States and around the world. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly 20% of U.S. residents have a disability, and that means 1 in 5 U.S. residents have some sort of impairment that may potentially keep them from accessing certain spaces and taking part in various opportunities that are available to able-bodied people. Based on the 2018 annual report on people with disabilities in America, people with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 64 suffer from about 30% of the unemployment rate. That is astounding. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, which was a landmark civil rights law that sought to protect those with disabilities from being discriminated against in any kind of capacity. In comparison to other civil rights laws, ADA also requires employers to accommodate employees with disabilities, such as implementing accessibility in accommodations at work. In sport, ADA now requires that when a new sport facility is being built or renovated, architects and contractors need to be cognizant of how to make a facility wheelchair accessible, from seats, bathrooms, entrances, and exits, keeping all of that in mind. Also, sport leagues and teams need to be aware of putting closed captioning on the Jumbotron so that everyone can follow along with in-game promotions and other happenings during a sporting event. Although ADA has done a lot to benefit those with physical disabilities, there is still a long way to go. Today, there are thousands of athletes who are able to benefit because of ADA, such as athletes who are involved with the Paralympics. Many individuals with disabilities have difficulty finding a sport that is available to them and that is appropriate for their functionality and or skill level. And the para sports assist with the accommodations of athletes with a physical disability. Although a gym might offer basketball, it might not offer wheelchair basketball. A court may offer volleyball, but not sitting volleyball. Or a club might offer soccer, but not power soccer. The case of Casey Martin shows how ADA in the U.S. has helped in the creation of a fair playing field for athletes who may have a physical disability. In 1997, PGA golfer Casey Martin sued the PGA for his right to use a golf cart during competition. Casey suffered from a birth defect called Klippel-Trenaunay-Weber syndrome, which kept blood vessels in his right leg from working properly. Casey suffered from a different type of fatigue than the other golfers walking the length of the golf course, and it created excruciating and debilitating pain for him during competition. In the end, the court ruled that the use of a golf cart allowed Casey to be on an equal playing field as the other competitors. The court ruled that the use of the golf cart did not give Casey an unfair advantage. Casey was then able to use a golf cart and went on to have a longer career with the PGA. There are national and international opportunities for people who suffer from a physical disability to participate in an elite level of sport. They are called the Paralympics. The history of the Paralympics start in the mid-20th century after World War II. Many people in Europe returning to their homes with physical impairments that they had suffered from warfare is what led to this. Dr. Ludwig Guttmann recognized this and decided to organize a competition for wheelchair athletes during the opening ceremony of the 1948 Olympic Games in London, England, which was the first Olympiad to take place since 1938. The Olympics took a hiatus between World War II. This competition that took place in 1948 was named the Stoke Mandeville Games and involved veterans with spinal cord injuries. This was a huge milestone in Paralympic history and for athletes with physical disabilities. This event involved 16 injured servicemen and women from World War II who took part in archery. In 1952, the Stoke Mandeville Games became an international competition, and that is when the first annual International Stoke Mandeville Games took place. Eventually, these games became the Paralympics, which we all know and we all love as an international mega sporting event that is inclusive of athletes who have a physical disability. The Paralympics had the first official competition in Rome, Italy in 1960 after the Summer Olympics. During the first official Paralympics, 400 athletes from 23 countries competed. Initially, these games were only inclusive of wheelchair athletes, and it was not until the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, Canada, that the Paralympics were open to athletes with a range of physical disabilities. That same year, the Winter Paralympic Games took place in Örnsköldsvik, Sweden. During this first Winter Olympiad, 196 athletes from 16 different countries took part in competition. Not too shabby, if you ask me. The motto for the Paralympics is Spirit in Motion, and it is symbolized by the encircling of a central point, emphasizing the role of the Paralympic movement, bringing athletes together from all corners of the world to compete. The colors of the flag are the three colors most represented in national flags from around the world. For an athlete to qualify to participate in the Paralympics, they must qualify under at least one of the 10 levels of impairment established by the International Paralympic Committee, which include impaired muscle power, which is when there is reduced force generated by muscles or muscle groups, such as muscle of one limb or the lower half of the body. Impaired passive range of movement. This is when the range of movement in one or more joints is reduced permanently. Limb deficiency. This is due to the total or partial absence of bone or joints as a consequence of trauma, illness, or congenital limb deficiency. Leg length difference. This is due to bone shortening in one leg because of a congenital deficiency or a trauma. Short stature is when a person's standing height is reduced significantly because of dimensions in bone, upper limbs, lower limbs, or trunk. Hypertonia, this is the increase in muscle tension and a reduced ability of a muscle to stretch because of a neurological condition. Ataxia, this is a lack of coordination of muscle movements because of a neurological condition. And then athetosis, which is characterized by unbalanced involuntary movements and a difficulty in maintaining in a symmetrical posture due to neurological condition. And then we have visual impairment, when vision is impacted by either an impairment of the eye structure or optical nerves or optical pathways. And lastly, intellectual impairment, which is a limitation in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. In order for an athlete to be placed under the level, the athlete must first have their disability evaluated by a classification panel, or the athlete may be observed during an official competition. If an athlete undergoes evaluation under a panel, then the athlete will be evaluated by 2 or 3 classifiers that will determine their level of impairment. Some athletes are classified in different categories throughout their career. And this is because sometimes the medical condition of an athlete changes, so that athlete may need to be reassessed. The Paralympics, an international competition that happens every 4 years after the Olympics, and the competition is fierce. Parasports or adaptive sports are sports that have modifications for athletes with physical disabilities, allowing these athletes to participate and compete on an even playing field with one another. Adaptive sports for the Summer and Winter Olympics include shooting parasport, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, goalball, powerlifting, sitting volleyball. And for winter, para-alpine skiing, para-ice hockey, para-biathlon, para-snowboard, para-cross-country skiing, wheelchair curling, and many of these sports have an able-bodied version, but are adapted for the level of impairment of the individual. For more research on adaptive sport, look up some of the able-bodied versions of the sport and also look up some of the adaptive versions and compare the similarities and differences of both versions, such as volleyball and sitting volleyball. In the past, there have been Paralympians who have competed in the Olympics and the Paralympics. Natalia Partyka from Poland has competed in para-table tennis and table tennis. Natalie Dutoy from South Africa has been an Olympic and Paralympic swimmer. And then we have Zara Nemati from Iran, who has been an archer for both the Paralympics and the Olympics. In recent years, there has been some controversy regarding Paralympic athletes who compete in athletics and use a prosthetic leg for track and field competitions. Many of the Paralympic track and field runners use a prosthetic limb known as the cheetah. That is made of carbon fiber and allows the runner to have more mobility and puts the athlete on an even playing field with able-bodied runners. However, some critics feel like the use of this prosthetic limb may give athletes an unfair advantage to their able-bodied counterparts because of the lightness of the prosthetic and the fact that athletes that use the prosthetic do not have to fear having certain athletic injuries like an Achilles tear or cramping of the calf. According to an article written by Larry Greenmeyer, the blades store energy as they bear the runner's weight and then release it as the runners push off the ground. Much of the way a leg's calf muscles and Achilles tendons spring and recoil, but an important difference is in the foot, which a blade prosthetic does not pivot or generate its own energy. One of the most famous runners in Paralympic and Olympic history is Oscar Pistorius. In 2008, Pistorius underwent a series of tests, and researchers determined that Pistorius used 17% less energy than that of able-bodied runners at an elite level. The tests revealed that it took him 21% less time to reposition or swing his legs between strides. Media coverage for para-athletes has always been minimal. For instance, while the Paralympics come right after the Olympics and include elite athletes from all around the world, para sports still do not get nearly enough attention and as much coverage as able-bodied sports. Media coverage of Paralympic sports is starting to gain momentum, and in 2018, NBC Olympics presented an unprecedented coverage of the Paralympic Winter Games in Pyeongchang, which included 94 hours on television. That is nearly double the coverage of the previous Olympics that took place in Sochi, Russia in 2014. In all, NBC Olympics presented more than 250 hours of coverage. While there seems to be an increase in the media coverage of Paralympic sports, journalists are still learning on how to report and present information on para-sport athletes. Many focus on the disability and not the ability. Understanding the terminology that needs to be used when focusing on para-athletes and para-sports is important for any sport journalist. Paralympics New Zealand has created a terminology guide to assist with language of parasport and assist with journalists and others involved with parasport to learn and to understand how to use certain terms when focusing on the accomplishments and feats of these athletes. In the past, journalists have focused so much on the disability and not on the athlete or the sport. Remember, the Paralympics are an elite competition, just like the Olympics, and these athletes have worked extremely hard and have made several sacrifices to be able to compete at such a high level. While knowing the backstory of an athlete is intriguing and gives us insight into how the athlete may have overcome obstacles, it is important to focus on the ability and not the disability. The Paralympics are not without controversy, just like the able-bodied Olympics. Doping and cheating happen in the Paralympics too. For example, both the Russian Olympic and Paralympic athletes were banned from competing for their country because both organizations were found to be guilty of doping. The Paralympics continue to make feats, and more countries are creating opportunities for athletes with physical disabilities. For instance, in 2019, the U.S. Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee voted to come together and combine the committees and the names. As of 2019, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee was established, a step towards inclusion and equality. In addition, cities that host the Paralympics are now able to see the benefits of creating an inclusive culture where athletes have accessibility in sport facilities and sport opportunities. After Tokyo received a bid to host the Olympics and Paralympics, they decided to focus on accessibility throughout the city. For Japan's aging society, in addition to more sport opportunities for people with physical disabilities. We still have a long way to go when we think about sport and opportunities for people with physical disabilities to have equal media coverage, access to sport facilities, and accommodations to play and participate in certain sports. I will leave you with this question. How can you, as a future sport professional, work to create more opportunities for access and accommodations for people with physical disabilities to participate in sports?